So a couple weeks ago, I was fortunate enough to get my hands on the DualSense controller for the PS5, and I did a teardown here on YouTube. If you missed it, check out the card in the upper right hand corner. But anyway, the overwhelming majority of feedback I got from people was to do the following. Well, looks like we're just going to have to mod it. So I haven't had a lot of time to get in there and inspect the electrical aspects of the controller yet, but one thing that kept on popping up was that people didn't seem to like the design of the PS5 DualSense. And while I'm a little shocked by that personally, hey, I think we can still up the aesthetic game of this thing. So first order of business, let's fire up some Photoshop and let's take a look at what this thing's going to look like. Now, I'd be remiss to say that anything but blue would probably be a poor decision for the first one, because let's be honest, Sony and blue, they go hand in hand. So I'm thinking all the buttons in blue would look really, really nice. Next, I'm thinking we go ahead and remake the stick caps and do them in white. Touchpad, clearly blue. And let's talk about that black bezel. Now, I had a little bit of trouble here. I was kind of thinking that orange would look really nice, and I still think it does. But in the end, I'm thinking that blue is probably the right way to go. What you're about to see me embark on is a massive undertaking. I literally sat there and molded up the entire controller, sans the front and back shell. Now, like I said, this was a massive project requiring tons of silicone. So for the silicone today, I'm going to be using a little bit of Moldstar 30, and unfortunately I ran out of Moldstar 30 throughout the end of the process, and I ended up using some Alumilite Plat 40, which works great as well. Both of these silicones I highly recommend. So after mixing about 80 ounces of silicone, I'm going to drop it into my vacuum chamber, and we're going to suck all the air out of that silicone. Now with that silicone in the vacuum chamber, you can see I'm pulling 29 inches of mercury, actually more than that, and that silicone's going nuts as all that air escapes out of it. Now ultimately what I'm going to end up doing is pressure casting all my parts in my pressure pot, and realistically any air bubbles or voids that are left in the silicone will end up in deformations in my parts later on, so clearly we don't want that. Let's go ahead and get these parts poured, and once it's all done, we're going to get them set up into the pressure pot, and we are going to put them under pressure to allow the silicone to cure. So with the first half of the mold's done, we're going to prep for the second half of our mold. Now I'm going to use a little bit of this Alumilite silicone to silicone mold release. This stuff works really well, and what I'd kind of recommend is doing a minimum of 2 coats on here. So what you'll see me do is obviously open this package up. This is a brand new one. And I'm going to go ahead and apply that on there with a paintbrush, and I'm going to do 2 or 3 coats, and it's important to do more than one just to make sure you get every single area. Silicone likes to stick to pretty much nothing except for itself, so you definitely want to make sure you do this correctly or you're going to end up with a silicone brick. But anyway, with that out of the way, let's get the second half of these molds poured, and let's rinse and repeat the silicone process we did earlier. And with all that mold work finally finished, it's time to crack these things open and make sure they look good. For the resin we're going to be using, we're going to use a little bit of Alumilite Clear. I really like this resin. It's a urethane based resin. It works fantastic. I've already mixed up some custom blue mica powder, so we're going to use that for our Sony PlayStation blend, so to speak. If you're interested in trying out this Alumilite Clear resin, Alumilite's provided a discount code. It's ROCKER10, and you can follow the link in the description if you want to try some of it yourself. Again, highly recommend this stuff. So here's what that mica looks like in this clear resin, and I think that's going to look absolutely amazing once we inject it into the molds. To inject the molds, we're going to use a basic syringe. And you're going to see me adding some straws to the molds, and the basic reason for this is those straws effectively act as reservoirs of resin. Now this is extremely important when you're casting complex parts such as these, and the reason why is when we add them to the pressure pot will crush all the bubbles and they will make them smaller, and when they do so, additional resin is going to be necessary to fill the voids that those bubbles left. So this is an extremely important step when you're casting complex parts, such as these for the DualSense controller. With that out of the way, let's montage through the rest of these. And after all that work, now comes the moment of truth. Did the molds work? And how do these parts look? And I'm not gonna lie to you guys, the part I'm the most excited to see is this band that runs across the front of the controller. From a casting standpoint, it's an incredibly difficult part to cast and mold, and the reason why is because it's both incredibly thin and very complex. And to be honest, the opportunity to make mistakes is very, very, very high. Yeah, we got a little bit of flashing on here, but other than that, I'd say this thing looks pretty much good to go. So let's get it cleaned up and make sure it fits right. But this is a success. And honestly, I'm thrilled because this part alone probably took about 40 ounces of silicone. Parts done, time to reassemble. First thing I'm going to reassemble is the touchpad. And if you end up doing this yourself, when you reassemble the touchpad, you're going to hit the back of the PCB with your hot air rework station or a heat gun. Now mind you, want the heat extremely low. I'm using 250 degrees. And the reason why is it'll reactivate the glue that's on the back of it. As for the rest of the reassembly, it's pretty straightforward. Just put it back together the way you took it apart. And pay extra close attention to all of those extremely fragile flex cables that are for the adaptive triggers and the microphones. One other thing I'll just point out here is I really appreciate the attention to detail with these silicone membranes and whatnot. It's very nice that they have kind of posts already put in them, so it just makes reattaching everything and reassembling everything extremely easy to do. Okay, reassembly is about complete, and it's time for the moment of truth. Will the faceplate fit back on the controller correctly? Now, based on what I saw earlier, it should, but you know, ultimately it's going to come down to if we can get it to fit on there, and you know what? It looks like it's going to fit just fine. This project was a massive undertaking. It took a long time to mold and cast all these parts and get everything right, but I'm extremely happy with the end result. The faceplate turned out amazing. I love the semi-transparent look of it. I love the way the mica pops through the resin, and the other thing that I spent a lot of time on was those sticks, and I like the blue base with the white stick caps. I think that's a really nice contrast with all the blue that's on that front area. The other thing I redid was that PlayStation logo that you're seeing on the front, and what I did is I kind of added a little bit of two-tone to make it more the actual PlayStation colors. Originally I wasn't planning on doing that, but in the end I'm really glad I did because I think it's a really nice touch. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you check out the teardown that I mentioned earlier in the video up here in the card in the right hand corner. And also check out these videos here on the screen, as if you enjoyed this customization, I'm sure you'll enjoy these. Anyway guys, if you enjoyed this, give me a comment, like, and subscribe, and I'll catch you for the next one here soon.